Turning a cherished something into a parking lot is as quintessentially Houston as humidity. This is what the Houston Chronicle had to say about the AstroWorld closure in their 2024 article about the now-closed theme park. Houston's most resilient theme park opened in 1968 and outlived many competitors that could not make the Houston market work for them, including Busch Gardens Houston, Hanna-Barbera Land, and Ciarama Marine World. But in the end, it was not enough. It's now late 2025, a little more than 20 years after Six Flags AstroWorld closed, and yet the Houston metro of nearly 8 million people still does not have a major regional theme park.
Do you know that the bridge connecting AstroWorld to its parking lot was privately owned? It was built to accommodate a planned monorail system that was never built. The bridge was engineered with extra supports on both sides for the monorail beamway, but the monorail plan was abandoned, and the bridge was later used for a tram system instead.
And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And this is Ian.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. And today's episode is all about AstroWorld. AstroWorld, the beloved Houston regional theme park, has been closed for 20 years and a month.
Yeah.
Really. So that's kind of funny timing. Crazy to think about that, because we were planning this episode without me even realizing the fact that it had been closed for 20 years. And so it's a perfect time to talk about this park. And what kind of made me think of this park is the recent closure of Six Flags America. That is a very sad situation, because I don't expect that to ever reopen. Kind of like how AstroWorld was turned into a parking lot rather than anything else fun to do for the family. I can see a very similar fate for Six Flags America. But I'm hoping, there's hope out there. And it also made me think of the whole Jaga Lake saga, another lost park, very important to the American theme park history. And we recently did an episode on both, so make sure to check those out on Coaster Kings Radio. But today is all about AstroWorld, a very fascinating little theme park, well, big theme park, really, in Houston. And Ian is back, and he's going to start us off with some history.
So, as always, I love history. I love context. So many people know that AstroWorld was built right next to the Houston Astrodome, and they weren't planned at the same time, but Houston Mayor Roy Hofheinz, he's the former mayor of Houston, once he was kind of the leader of the Astrodome project, and that opened in 1965, and a holding group called the Astro Domain was created to develop the surrounding land. And so they had all this extra land around their shiny new stadium. And in September of 1967, Hofheinz announced the construction of the AstroWorld theme park. This was a park that, again, Randall Dwell & Associates was tapped into to design. And the large pedestrian bridge that Alex mentioned in our opening was built over 610 to connect the park to the Astrodome, allowing the park to utilize the Astrodome's parking lot as well, which was part of the design. And this was meant to be a large shopping and entertainment complex. The monorail was going to be connecting hotels and other things to the theme park. That obviously didn't happen, but the hotels and things like that did. So that was really kind of where they announced it, and they tapped Dwell to come in and design it.
So he was the designer. What did he design also? He did
Six Flags Over Texas.
He was Six Flags Over Texas too.
It was Six Flags Over Texas. So this was really, and Six Flags Over Georgia. So this was his big non-Six Flags, his first big non-Six Flags project for the Randall Dwell & Associates. And this is also where what we call the dual loop was really perfected, was at AstroWorld. So that design and we'll talk about the park layout, but it really was just a singular loop that you would complete either clockwise or counterclockwise. And
then he went on to design the Marriott parks, right?
Yes, he designed the Marriott parks. And his firm also designed MGM Grand Adventures, was kind of a weird last project for them as well.
This is funny because to me it starts putting all these pieces together, because layout-wise, I can totally see the Great America Parks. The first thing I thought about was 100%. Great America Parks.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. That's great.
That's the design. And so, Alex, you're talking about the grand opening happens in June 1st of 1968. Is that correct?
Yeah, you taught me something with these notes, because I had never looked into it. The park had one entrance. It was a parking lot facing entrance, as we mentioned with the bridge connecting the Astrodome parking. This was not so thinly veiled anti-civil rights infrastructure. The park was not accessible by bus. It was not easy or practical to get to the park via public transportation. They wanted people with cars. And in the 60s, based on socioeconomic inequity following the beginning of the civil rights movement, people of color were not expected to have cars and be able to access this park with ease. So it's a fascinating...
And this is...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is something we see at a lot of southern parks, like Six Flags Over Georgia even, where we don't talk about this, but none of them were ever officially segregated, so the parks can kind of skate over this fact. But there was definitely infrastructure in place to discourage non-white patrons, if that makes sense, throughout their construction and kind of their design.
Yeah, it was more about like they could get away with saying that it was about attracting a certain high dollar clientele. Right. They could just say, "Oh, well, it wasn't. We just wanted to attract people with money." But it's like, well,
right?
Who had the money?
Exactly.
Who was in the position to have money to do these things?
To have the money for that.
Yeah. But I digress. This park featured a relatively new function for regional parks, the pay one price admission model. This was something that was pioneered by Six Flags over Texas. This park at AstroWorld opened. Okay, it did open after Six Flags Over Georgia, so there were already two Six Flags parks employing this method of single admission. It was $4.50, which adjusted for inflation in 2025 dollars would be $42.12, and 50 cents to park your car. Children had a discounted rate of $3.50 or $32.76 in 2005 dollars. The park included, it included extensive outdoor cooling, an outdoor cooling system by IA Naman and Associates. It was famous. This was like a marketing gimmick for them, was having like outdoor air conditioning, which because they were
insane.
I think they were right to address the immediate suspicion that people might have had of spending a summer day in a giant concrete amusement park in Houston, and that was revolutionary at the time.
And it's funny, the first thing I think about when I think of outdoor air conditioning, I think of Disney's Animal Kingdom, because it's so hot and the animals are clearly not going to be up and about all day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Disney installed outdoor air conditioning systems so that all the little, all the animals will be out on display during park hours and people will be hopping around the park. So that'd be cooler in the guest view areas than it would be, to hide in the shade, for example. Fascinating stuff. And the designers of the park were actually quite inspired by Disneyland's original kind of concept. And then, of course, what's been done at Six Flags Over Texas and Six Flags Over Georgia is kind of having themed lands, having areas of the park. And this time, unlike the more regional themes of both Over Texas and Over Georgia, they went ahead and did a more global approach to their themed land. So the original themed areas of AstroWorld included Americana Square, Maudeville, the European Village, Alpine Valley, Western Junction, and Plaza de Fiesta and Oriental Corner. Very much names of the 60s. I mean, Oriental Corner cracks me up, man.
Oriental Corner.
I love Oriental Corner. Oh, my God.
And Maudeville, of course. Every area.
Maudeville is my favorite.
Maudeville referred to?
So Maudeville this is 1968. So like this is like the peak of like the swinging 60s. So like the term mod was like meant to be like the go-go skirts and like mini skirts and go-go boots, like that whole 60s aesthetic. Like think Austin Powers is like very mod. And so the term mod actually at Disneyland, the hat shop in Tomorrowland during the 60s is called the Mod Hatter, which is really
fascinating.
Cute.
See, I didn't know any of this. Interesting.
So and mod is just short for modern. That's all it is.
It's just short for modern, yeah.
A very popular colloquial shorthand in the 60s for something that was cutting edge.
Cool. Like a Tomorrowland of sorts.
Yeah. Every park
essentially
featuring it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
there were so many good ones.
The USA.
USA section, Maudeville, Contemporary
Yeah.
Carolinas at Carowinds.
Yes,
Probably
at
my
Carowinds.
favorite.
Yes, that's my favorite one. I'm like, okay, guys, you're really stretching it. You needed a place to put your modern Aero sports car ride. That's what
Yes.
all of these were for, was
They
just
were
to put the
all
modern Aero sports car ride
the
there.
landing pads for the Aero Stingray drive it yourself car ride.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with a bit of a lineup of the opening attractions at the park, which included a couple of really cool rides. Not gonna lie, kind of like, I think, very competitive attractions.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this 1968, the opening lineup, I think we have to also think about the fact that this is post Mine Ride, but it's still pre like roller coasters at being at every theme park. So they really didn't have a roller coaster in this lineup. Sort of. They sort of did. We'll talk about that. They had a train encircling the park like Disneyland, the 610 Limited, and it had 2 locomotives throughout the mid 80s until they were replaced. They were coal locomotives until they were replaced by diesel locomotives relocated from Magic Mountain's Grand Centennial Excursion Railway, which is an iconic attraction that is kind of lost to time, but they had a train system at Magic Mountain. And one of the original coal engines actually went to Silverwood Park, and the coaches for which are still in operation. So they're still using the coaches from the AstroWorld train at Silverwood. And one of the diesel engines actually still operates on the Pacific Coast Railroad at Santa Margarita Ranch, which is pretty awesome.
The Caroline.
And Caroline, they're still going.
It makes me really want to go. That's a Magic Mountain ride that is still in operation. For all intents and purposes, it's a Magic Mountain attraction.
It's funny, like we can do a whole episode about Magic Mountain's history now. Think about it, because if there's a park that has had every possible mood swing possible, it's Magic Mountain. I mean, safari
100%.
train rides, Pelican Corners. I mean, the dolphin shows. I mean, the park was a whole different kind of product. It's so
having an
interesting.
area themed to Monterey Bay.
I mean, this is going to have to be its own episode. Now think about it.
It will.
Mountain's
It'll
history
have
is
to
fascinating. Yeah.
Well,
anyway.
People don't realize Duel also designed the original layout for Magic Mountain because it was supposed to be a loop that went through the mountain as well. Anyways, sidetrack. Sorry, can you all hear me? You guys just disappeared.
We can hear you.
You're here. Okay, cool.
We're just fascinated by your little fun facts.
It is. So the top attraction, kind of the main attraction for the park, was the Alpine Sleigh. And this was a Disney-inspired aero development ride called the Aero Glide Dark Ride. It had outdoor sections, an animatronic Yeti. It also, in some pictures, had a man dressed up as a Yeti as part of the attraction.
So the opening season, it had an actual
regular
guy,
person, an actual guy.
I think it was
in a
one or
suit.
2 seasons where a guy in an actual suit spent the entire day in a mountain and jump out at people. And he is the original Abominable Snowman guy, because when Matterhorn didn't actually have that yet until way
they
later.
didn't have him. That's a good point.
AstroWorld invented the scary snowman popping out at you. And it was some dude in some suit in an AC mountain jumping out at you. That's awesome.
And so it had basically a powered uphill section throughout the mountain. And then it had a powered descent sections. And it also, kind of going to that AC theme, had a carrier AC system that capped the ride at 10 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 12 degrees Celsius inside.
That's crazy.
Which in Houston,
cold as fuck.
That is so cold. That's
cold.
Refrigerator cold.
That's Russia. No, it's
that's
freezer.
It is.
No, that's below freezer.
Not refrigerator, freezer.
That's
Freezer cold. So it was real cold. And in 1983, the ride was closed. I suspect it was not the cheapest thing to operate.
Huge maintenance issue.
And it was and also probably relatively low in capacity because there were these individual sleigh cars. And so it was originally used as a backdrop. So they redid the Alpine Valley area into the Enchanted Kingdom as a children's area in 1984. But eventually the facade and the mountain actually got repurposed as the entrance marquee for Batman the Escape in 1993.
The most Time Warner thing ever.
The most Time Warner thing.
I mean, that's crazy. The fact that it stood there for all that time and then they turned it into a walk-through queue.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, they're just we'll keep the mountain in the background.
Based on my research of this extended opening year queue for Batman the Escape, it was very in the tradition of the Riddler's Revenge station, where it was a nightclub with lasers and music and neon. Like, it was a
Incredible.
whole
Bring it back,
thing.
man.
It was
that was
the
an
most
era.
Time Warner thing ever.
I love it.
But yeah, it's nice. I'm glad that attraction had so many leases on life. But as a ride, the ride system, I feel like it was Arrow's take on like a ghost train type system where it had with peaks and valleys and drops and stuff.
Was it a credit?
It was not. I think I would have counted it as a credit to look at it. You see that video clip I sent you? It's pretty neat.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's
Whole,
neat
like,
watching
thing
it
on it. Yeah.
go down that little drop at the end and then scoot back up to the station. I think it was the only one Arrow ever built. If there was another one, it was not very well documented because this ride never seemed to have another similar sounding ride at any regional park or at any of the Disney parks or what have you. But yeah, aside from... Go ahead.
I was going to say, there is a movie from 2022 called Apollo 10 and a Half, and it's basically about a kid growing up in Houston during the space race. And it actually includes a section about AstroWorld and specifically about the Alpine sleigh ride and like how excited kids were to ride it.
It was the
so it has made its way to media. It was the
like,
thrill
in
ride,
a movie or like in a documentary?
No, it's like it's a animated TV show. It's like an animated TV show. Yeah.
Oh, I
haven't watched too much of it, but I definitely know that it has a moment that is in AstroWorld where they're like going to AstroWorld.
I guess while on the topic of AstroWorld and media, of course, you can't forget that I'm not a super big into pop music, but one of the most influential pop albums of the recent history is, of course, AstroWorld. It's literally inspired by Travis Scott's childhood and AstroWorld. I mean, that's cool stuff. As a nerd for theme parks, it's like, hell yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he did the album cover for AstroWorld. There's two versions of it, and both of them directly reference the park. One of them is the Coney Island open mouth face.
Right.
That was the custom built entrance for the Texas Cyclone, except that it's Travis Scott's face. And then the other one is a picture of him inside an early aircraft Spider ride vehicle, but it's just a silhouette of him in the vehicle. And AstroWorld operated one of those rides from the 70s into the early 90s, I think.
That's awesome, yeah.
I don't think he was even old enough to have ridden the Spider when it was there, but he did his research because for that photo, I was like, oh, wow. He went and found the Spider to recreate. Well, yeah, so it's definitely left its mark on history. As a Beyonce fan, I like to imagine that Beyonce went there growing up. I don't know if she's ever talked about it, but when I think of Houston, I think of Beyonce.
I just think of parking lots.
Yeah. That's so true. But yeah, aside from the Alpine Sleigh, which I think was definitely the signature attraction for the park, they had several Astro labeled rides. Like the Houston Astro theme and motif was running very deep. So I feel like if they couldn't figure out, like when in doubt, like just put Astro in the title. So you had the Astro Needle, a Willy Burler Space Tower, which was 340 feet tall or 100 meters.
Tall.
Very, very tall.
For the era, it's really tall. Wow.
Incredibly tall. And Von Roll provided the original cabin for this ride. It was very similar to the Space Spiral at Cedar Point, which opened in the following year. And I think with the same, if not the same specifications. Intamin did a remodel of the cabin in 1979. Probably was not air conditioned originally, and then Intamin came in and did air conditioning. The ride was taken down in 1999. I remember reading about that and people being very disappointed and surprised that it closed because it just was so iconic and so cool and a likable attraction, and it just seemed kind of unnecessary. But this was, that's Premier Parks for you. They took the Astro Needle down, and it was sent to Six Flags Mexico to be reinstalled, but that never actually happened. And that's going to be a theme here. Rides that left AstroWorld. Six Flags was all gung-ho to use AstroWorld to siphon out its resources and bolster up existing parks with the attractions, and so many of them went to other parks and were not constructed. And even though this happened in 99 when the park was still open and at the time was not considered in danger of being closed, it actually kind of set a precedent for for rides being relocated from AstroWorld, and then not actually being rebuilt, reconstituted, sadly. And of course, you can't have a Von Roll Sky Tower cabin without a Von Roll ropeway. There's no way that you can have a park in the 1960s, a regional park in the 60s and 70s, without a Von Roll Sky Ride. And AstroWorld was no exception. And of course, the name of the Von Roll Sky Ride was the Astro Way. It was installed with a station in Oriental Corner. And of course, the other station was in Alpine Valley. And I like to imagine that it was very in the tradition of Fantasyland and like the Matterhorn with that whole vibe and skiing and such. Alpine Valley was such a cute little area with its sky ride station and its little sleigh ride. In 1981, the ride was remodeled with modern cars, larger vehicles, much like a lot of the sky rides would later see in the late 70s and 80s. And it ran from the day that the park opened until the day the park closed. It was one of the rides that was there the whole era, the entire era. The third and probably most short-lived of the original Astro rides was the Astro Wheel. It was Intamin's first double Ferris wheel. So if you are familiar with the Intamin double and triple wheels that we saw in the 70s, these became really popular because people loved Ferris wheels, but the loading configuration of like the Eli Bridge Ferris wheels, for example, which were commonplace in amusement parks and fairs, it was time consuming and slow. And Intamin had the brilliant idea to take a traditional Ferris wheel and they were like, what if we could lay it flat and load the cars, and the cars would pivot down and all load at the same time, and then you just pick the whole thing up and spin. And then they had another great idea, which was, well, what if we had two at the same time? And one would be down and loading, and then the other one would have its ride cycle while the other side is loading, and they would swap, vice versa. And this concept, even though none of these rides are around anymore, which is very sad, but like I rode the triple wheel at Paramount's Great America. I almost rode the giant wheel at Hershey Park. That one had been there for quite some time. Their double Intamin Ferris wheel. I just missed it by a year. Kings Island had one. Wonderland in Australia, I believe, took the one from Kings Island.
I actually had no idea that you actually rode the one in Great America. That's wild. The fact that it lived long enough for you to actually ride it is crazy. And on that note, true. I also think when you look at photos of these rides, especially the early installations like the AstroWorld, the AstroWheel one, they were kind of scary looking because in order to do the whole pivoting thing and laying it down and also having it be a Ferris wheel, they were kind of just hanging on chains, the vehicles. Like it was a rudimentary kind of basic attraction. So like they were just hanging on these chains. Like it looked like someone could have just pieced it together in their backyard, literally. So
absolutely.
Like, to me, I was just looking at these photos. I'm like, this looks kind of like, I don't know, sketchy even. Intamin made that? That's wild. Anyway.
Yeah. Magic Mountain had the coolest one that ever lived. It was based on the AstroWorld one, but instead of a standard Ferris wheel movement, it moved like a scrambler. So it was 4 small Ferris wheels attached to a large wheel, and they would rotate in a very difficult to follow pattern. Like if you were riding it, it probably felt very unpredictable, like which direction you were traveling. And just like the AstroWorld ride, one side would lay down and load, and then the other side would come up. These rides, the original ones, had an elbow configuration, and they were mounted on the ground. And I think both of these rides didn't even last until the 80s. Like both of them were gone. Magic Mountain's closed in 79. I don't think AstroWorld's even lasted 10 years. I think there were issues with stress on the elbow because it was mounted to the ground. The later versions had a big post, and then the wheels were connected via a very long, like seesaw-looking arm. And I think that relieved the problem because by the time those ones, and like the triple wheel at Great America, by the time those rides closed, it was about capacity. It was about having too much capacity and not enough interest in the ride.
3 of those. That's wild.
Yeah. The one at Great America was cool, and it had a really long ride cycle because it took forever to find, 150 people to ride that thing, or however many people it could hold at one time, and it was loud. It would like park part of it was like the rotating mechanism, and part of it was like the lifting mechanism. The double wheels were pretty straightforward. It was up or down, like either way. The triple wheel ones had a mechanism that would lift the wheel off the ground, and then it would rotate and then set the wheel down. So it was very complex, and the sound, you could hear it from across the park, but it was so cool, and you could see it like from the highway, and like I'm sure it caused car accidents like when the park opened because it was just the most spectacular looking thing. AstroWorld in South Korea had one that was called the Kraken, and it was in the outdoor island. And like for the time that it was there, I like to imagine that this Intamin triple wheel was like an icon of Seoul because it was right there in the middle of everything and so spectacular to look at. But yeah, of all of these Intamin double wheels and such, there's none left. And the original one was at AstroWorld. And of course, it was in the Modville area. It was like the peak mod aesthetic.
Yes.
And as if Astro Wheel wasn't enough wheels, there's also a wagon wheel, which was a Chance Trabant, which is one of the last original rides that were still operating in 2005 at AstroWorld. They actually made it all the way through. And then it was sent to Elitch Gardens, but surprise, surprise, was never actually built. And another ride that they opened with, which was definitely very inspired by Disneyland, was Jungle Cruise. Well, actually, it wasn't Jungle Cruise. It was Jungle Cruise inspired, but the ride was called Lost World Adventure. So yeah, it was a Jungle Cruise style boat ride that had several rethemes over the years. Most notably in 1985, following the positioning of Accelerate, which is the aero suspended swinging coaster that was built pretty much right over it. And then it was replaced by a tidal wave in 1988.
So in 1969, like most theme parks, they realized they needed to do some additions to flesh out their lineup and also attract customers to return. And they went to Aero, of course. And two of the rides that they had built were the Bamboo Chute, which was an aero flume with custom boats to resemble bundles of bamboo. If you haven't seen the pictures of them, like look them up. They're real cute. And the boats would be shipped in 2005 after AstroWorld closed to La Ronde to operate on La Piton. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, until its closure in 2017.
Oh, and then the Piton.
The Piton. Oh, thank you. Thank you. What does that mean? Is it?
I don't know. I do not know what it means. I'm going to Google it right now.
I'm going to say it's the little lumberjack.
Piton, but also I don't know what
I've heard other people say it correctly, but I don't know what it means.
I don't know. I want to say it means little lumberjack, which sounds cute to me.
I always call it La Poutine as a joke.
La Poutine.
It's a great flume. And you float in giant cheese curds. That's my dream.
It literally just says the Pitoon. Like, I don't know. It has the exact same word. But I don't know.
Am I spelling it? I may not have spelled it correctly, you guys.
Please hold.
Let me double check.
Well, while you guys double check, the other 69 edition was AstroWorld's first roller coaster, the Serpent, which was an Aero Mini Mine Train, one of the 4 Aero Mini Mine Train. It's thought that the train parts were presumably sent to Six Flags Over Texas or La Ronde for their Mini Mine Trains after the park closed in 2005, but that hasn't ever been confirmed.
I mean, I would add it. Yeah.
And then, so what is it? What does it mean? Did anyone find out?
My search led me to like a terrible answer that just said, well, there was another answer that said bimbo or like.
Wow, I mean,
okay.
A bimbo, yeah. A bimbo flu. A bimbo flu. A pretty woman or a bimbo. Yeah, so maybe
it's some made up word. Like, I don't know.
It might be.
I should have asked some of our French Canadian friends.
I was going to say, the French Canadians can correct us.
Anyway, if you know it, send us a message. Yeah.
And also, so when these two rides opened as like a really cute little package deal from Aerodynamics, you can still pull up POVs of both of these rides and find that they're sort of intertwined with each other. At this point, the Oriental Corner became Oriental Village. They renamed the area to commemorate having an actual ride lineup and not just a station for the Sky Ride.
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
And the final edition was 69, was something that I think the park planned to open with the park was the Alpine Carousel, which is a Denzel carousel that dates back to 1895. And according to Alex's research, is sold to a private collector and is still operational, which is awesome. You love to see
it's in
these
some
old
guy's
carousels still being taken care
private
of.
museum on his estate.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. So next we have, the first area addition, the first expansion that the park had was the addition of a small little area called Fun Island, and it was a very small little island between the Astro Needle and the little Mexico area that they have. And it also was it was home to their first major coaster, and I use that term very lightly because it was the only coaster in the park that wasn't the kiddie coaster, the Serpent, but it was also just barely even a coaster of substance. It was a Chance Toboggan. It was really cute. It was themed to an old tree. And if you've ridden a Chance Toboggan, you know that this roller coaster, while it's technically a full-size coaster, it can fit on the back of a single trailer bed. It is not a huge ride. This was a funny choice for them. I wonder if it was just because, every amusement park in the history of the industry, they were probably over budget and there was probably not a whole lot of money. So they were like, let's just build this, a Chance Toboggan because it's something. Right. And there was there was two bridges connecting it, one on the Astro Needle side and one on the main Midway side there. And there was also a kiddie, a play area, and a fun house. All of this stuff, but the Fun Island stuff didn't really last. The Swamp Buggy was done. When they continued on with their next big expansion that Sean's about to talk about, the Swamp Buggy was quickly deemed obsolete and unnecessary because they built a real coaster in 1972.
Yeah, so just 2 years later, they introduced the county fair area of the park, which was this kind of the era of clowns and all that. It was this circus kind of this was probably an actual vibe back then, but now of course it wouldn't have been. Anyway, they added the Dexter Freebish's electric roller ride. Say that 10 times fast.
It's a great name,
which is surprised not in Maudeville because I feel like that would have been a Maudeville name. Either way, that was the tallest coaster in the U.S. when it opened, 80 feet tall, and it was also AstroWorld's first major roller coaster, like Alice just said. It was represented and it anchored the county fair expansion that was later annexed by the Nottingham Village in 1981. And at that point, the ride got a more mainstream name, Excalibur. Then it was removed in 1998 to make place for Serial Thriller, the park's SLC, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And the ride was sent to Frontier City, but was scrapped in 2005, and the trains went to Six Flags Over Texas for their original mine train. And if I'm not mistaken, this ride was never actually built either, right?
No.
Yeah, another one of those move but not built.
This was the first aero coaster, along with the one at Opryland, to use the cylindrical supports, so the pillar supports, instead of using the grid supports that Aero had used before. So it had both, but it was one of the first installations that had the large scale supports.
And it just had a single spine track bed that was a much more streamlined Gold Rusher at Six Flags Magic Mountain.
I was going to say, it reminds you a lot of Gold Rush's construction
getting close.
Type. Yeah.
Yes.
They were Gold Rusher was the bridge between wooden superstructures and the old track system of the 60s, and then what would then be the new system, because then Great Adventure, when they did their mine train in 73, it was a quantum leap from the stuff that they were doing 3 years before, with big giant tall supports and huge a single lift hill and that carried the ride throughout the entire experience. That was something that AstroWorld did first. It was a very unusual approach to a mine train. You look at the thing, the layout is so weird.
It's so weird.
It looked like they drew it on a napkin. I don't know what they were. They were just following their heart the whole way. I recommend
everyone to just look at video. Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah, the POVs really are confusing. Sorry.
No, very good. In 1972 was also the year that the park added a colorful mascot named Marvel McFay, which was introduced with a slew of animal sidekicks, very typical of the time. And just like every other Disney parallel that we've been drawing so far, this whole character was designed by a Disney legend named Rolly Crump.
And so Marvel McFay, if you're in Houston and like talk to like boomers and older, like it is something that people remember about the park because it was the mascot for quite some time. So in 1975, the Hoffenheims family, as well as Roy Hoffenheim themselves, had faced a series of health problems, and they liquidated their interest in their parks in 1976. And in the middle of that kind of decline in his health, Six Flags acquired a 20-year operating lease for AstroWorld in the middle of 1975, which included an option to purchase the park outright. And Six Flags would utilize that option in 1978 when the sale of the park was officially finalized, and the park went from AstroWorld to Six Flags AstroWorld.
This would mark like the end of Six Flags' era of constructing parks from the ground up. AstroWorld was their first acquisition, the first of what would be many. A company that became, I think, more as famous, if not more famous, for acquiring parks than they did for building parks, since they only really built 3 from the ground up.
Right.
In the midst of this gradual change of hands, I think one of the most significant moments in the timeline, not only of AstroWorld, but in the history of like Texas theme parks, was the introduction of the Texas Cyclone in 1976. And I love the history of this ride. I'm so fascinated by how ambitious this was, because it was so if you're a coaster enthusiast, especially if you're a coaster enthusiast in your 50s or older, you can recall the 80s and this sort of wooden coaster renaissance born out of the Din Summers Corporation and their eagerness and knack for relocating wooden coasters from closed amusement parks and building them in new parks and opening them up and marketing them as new rides. And that was something that was considered pretty revolutionary at the time. When the Phoenix opened at Knoebels, it was something that was just considered, it was just unheard of. Like it was some wooden coasters had been relocated, you know, in the roaring 20s. Like this was something that they were doing, you know, pre-World War II. But it had been a long time since that had been considered like a viable option. And then it started happening a lot more again in the 80s. You had like Six Flags America when they were still Wild World. Their anchor attraction was the Wild One vintage wooden coaster that was taken down and reassembled from the closed Paragon Park in Hull, Massachusetts. So for context, in the 1970s, the mid 70s, this new wooden coasters were being built somewhat sparingly. The Philadelphia Toboggan Company was sort of starting to slow down. 1976 was a major year for wooden coasters because we got the Texas Cyclone and we got the Screaming Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis, which was John Allen PTC's like swan song magnum opus, and then that was the last thing they did. They bowed out of the custom wooden coaster market altogether. And at that point, for this like blossoming regional parks in the mid to late 70s, wooden coasters were just kind of haphazardly happening. Bill Cobb was the only person designing wooden coasters during this era. So, not the only. International Amusement Devices also was designing them. That's how we got Colossus at Magic Mountain. Yeah. But a lot of the wooden coasters being built during this era, like Rolling Thunder at Great Adventure, the Tornado at Adventureland in Iowa, these were designed by Bill Cobb. And AstroWorld, always the visionaries, had this crazy idea to relocate the Coney Island Cyclone from Brooklyn, because at the time the ride was closed, it was in disrepair, and it was in danger of being demolished. The city was having their own, like, there was a lot of drama and issues, and the city wanted to build an aquarium where the coaster was. Like, this kind of stuff is exactly why, like, the American coaster enthusiasts exists, because there was a lot of this happening to, like, historic wooden coasters, rides that predated World War II or even World War I. And there just didn't seem to be a lot of public interest or adequate public interest in maintaining and preserving vintage wooden coasters. But in the spirit of preservation and celebrating America, AstroWorld really wanted to relocate the Coney Island Cyclone. this ultimately was considered completely cost prohibitive. It simply was not possible. But the park was determined to keep the Coney Island Cyclone experience alive. They had great faith in the layout of the ride, which was iconic. The ride was famous for a reason. It was a loved and revered ride design because of how brilliant it was. And so they were like, well, if we can't bring it to our park, we're going to build our own. So they built a slightly taller, slightly faster, slightly larger Coney Island Cyclone with the assistance of Bill Cobb, who emulated the original Eddie Vedder design of the Coney Island Cyclone. And it was a huge hit. It opened in 1976. It anchored yet another expansion for the park, a kind of a branch off of their Maudeville area, which I think by that point had been renamed USA. Somewhere along the way, it was renamed USA. It was probably for the bicentennial, which was also 76. But Coney Island was its own little area on the other side of the Aero Stingray cars. They built like a little bridge over it, and they had the Cyclone. They had a giant, beautiful replica of the Coney Island Cyclone. I feel like they had already designed the whole area with like the shape of the coaster, and they were like ready to go. And then when they found out that they couldn't move the Coney Island Cyclone, they're like, well, it's too late now. Like, we're just going to build it.
And then didn't that just kind of start this whole almost like trend to just clone that model? Because suddenly after they built the clone for AstroWorld, suddenly we started seeing this exact ride pop up in so many parks. I mean, even there's even one in Germany. Like, it's wild stuff.
Yeah, in the 90s, they realized it took a long time, I guess, for it to catch on as like a trend. But once the third one opened, once Six Flags Over Georgia built the Georgia Cyclone, it was on. Then we were getting clones of this. We had the one at Magic Mountain. There was one at Six Flags Great America. There was one at Movie Park Germany. One opened in Japan at Yomiuri Land. Like the Coney Island Cyclone, there are two opened in Japan. There was one in Nara Dreamland too. I mean, this was
that's right. Was
people,
Asuka,
I forgot about that.
Asuka. The love of this ride layout was the code was cracked. It was too good to die. It was too well liked.
It is a great layout.
The Coney Island Cyclone reopened in the late 80s and received National Historic Landmark status at that point in the 80s. I think this excitement around the reopening of the Coney Island Cyclone was what led to the continued interest in the ride layout, because for that entire period of time, it took a long time. Texas Cyclone was the only cyclone operating for the first, I believe, 10 years after it opened. And people loved it. It had a really cool rolling stock from PTC. I actually messaged Janine Rebbe, who is one of the managers at PTC. We talk all the time, and I was like, Janine, I know you guys did 4-bench trains, one of rare PTC 4-bench trains. The only other coaster that we're aware of, that she's aware of, that they did that for was the Beast, which had these colossal 5-car 4-bench trains, I believe. Or was it 4 cars? Yeah, was it 4 or 5? I can't. 20. No, maybe it was 5 cars. It could have been 20 rows.
Crazy
if I'm
on
not
that
mistaken.
layout that they had.
It was massive. It was insane.
Trains.
I have to go back and look at a video. But yeah, so the PTC developed 4-bench trains because the Coney Island Cyclone was running its original rolling stock. It still runs them to this day, the 4-bench trains. And that was what they wanted. They were like, build us a 4-bench train because we want this coaster to be as authentic as it can be. Eventually, they went down to a 3-bench PTC train because of wear and tear issues. And the Beast at Kings Island would also do that after a few years. And then a 3-bench PTC train turned into a 2-bench Morgan Manufacturing train after a while. Morgan Manufacturing California Style is the official name of it. The fiberglass wooden coaster train, a salve for funky and finicky wooden coasters around the world that were beating up their rolling stock. It's sad that the Texas Cyclone declined the way that it did, because when it opened, it was considered the greatest roller coaster in the world by the measure of many. And when it closed, people hated it because the Morgan Manufacturing trains had these headrests that were boxed your head in. They called them coffin headrests. People already didn't like the Morgan trains. There are very few coasters that run Morgan trains that people actually like or appreciate. I think the Giant Dipper coasters are, and like the Dragon coaster in Playland are on the short list of like coasters where the Morgan trains are appreciated. And like the Jackrabbit at Seabreeze. These coaster trains served a significant purpose in their era, but a lot of parks were implementing them on their rides with limited success. And I think the biggest culprit, the worst offender, was the Texas Cyclone. In the last few years, they were convinced, I think Ace like strong-armed them into taking the headrests off. They were able to convince them that the headrests weren't necessary. But the ride experience suffered greatly over the years. If the ride had lasted into the RMC era, it absolutely would have been a candidate for RMC. It is the kind of ride that going through rolling stock, reprofiling, it had all of these changes. It's had some incidents, the ride had a lot of history, and I think it was the kind of ride that begged for the development of the RMC ride system. And in a way, we still sort of got it since Six Flags Over Georgia RMC, the Georgia Cyclone. But the Texas Cyclone, as difficult as it was to see that one go, it occupied a very important place in history, and it definitely served its purpose, and I think helped riders, consumers, guests really appreciate the Coney Island Cyclone, the original Cyclone. And like Sean said, it really helped birth this uncanny trend of parks building duplicates and variations and riffs off of the original Cyclone coaster.
Well, and I also want to say that
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say,
no, go ahead.
In this era as well, we have a tendency, because of the late years of AstroWorld, to think of it as the secondary third, it was the bottom tier of the Six Flags parks. But it's worth noting that this Cyclone project predated Judge Lloyd's Scream. This was the biggest roller coaster in Texas, you know what I mean, by any margin. It was going, anyway, so I just think that AstroWorld was a major player in Texas. It wasn't it was just the forgotten child of Six Flags over Texas. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It wasn't until the 80s where that started to creep into their legacy. Because in the 70s, AstroWorld was still that girl.
That's actually that was actually going to be my transition point here, is that people, because this was before Six Flags really got into the business of acquiring park after park after park. So when they got AstroWorld, it was still such a kind of small company with only, at this point, I think 4 parks, 4 assets. Am I correct?
Yeah, that was their fourth.
So it was their fourth asset. And at this point, I think for them, it was a major player. It was a thriving park. They were putting a lot of love into this park. And so the 70s are really kind of when they started playing the acquisition game. But because AstroWorld was first, they really got a couple of really cool additions. And Grease Lightning was another, 2 years later, 1978. Grease Lightning was a big deal for AstroWorld. It was AstroWorld's first looping coaster. And what's funny is that it later turned out to be one of 3 major Schwarzkopf loopers they had at the same time. That alone is a whole kind of fun story. But the ride's name and logo would later also be adapted by Kentucky Kingdom in 2003. Which kind of became an iconic name because Paramount's Great America turned Tidal Wave into Grease Lightning, but they had to spell it differently. And that's because it was going to be a copyright infringement. And then in 2002, Grease Lightning from Great America was actually acquired by Six Flags, and it was going to be a parts donor for Kentucky Kingdom's version of the ride. And Tidal Wave at the park in Illinois, which it was relocated to Six Over Georgia, was then open as Viper. Long story short, AstroWorld's Grease Lightning actually did live all the way up until the end of the park's operating days, and was then sold to Joyland in Lubbock. Is this Lubbock, Texas?
Lubbock, Texas, yeah.
But surprise, surprise, the ride was never actually built. And, another AstroWorld ride kind of went to the scrapyard. The only thing is that Six Flags did buy back the train eventually, because the ride was never constructed, from Joyland, and use it on Silver Bullets at Frontier City, which is just a standard looping star model Schwarzkopf looping coaster. And the remainder of the ride was scrapped, and Joyland eventually ended up closing right after the pandemic as well. So that park is dead. Anyway.
Very sad.
I think the
ballad of the shuttle loops in the Six Flags parks, it's fascinating that Kentucky Kingdom, when they had this Frankenstein model, they took the 2 Marriott shuttle loops even though there were two different versions. One was a flywheel and one was a weight drop model. But the one that they had running at Six Flags Over Georgia pretty consistently from 95 until 2001 needed some work. And it was a great opportunity for Kentucky Kingdom, apparently, to to get a new ride, but they didn't. The loop was worn out. The vertical loop was toast. So they took the vertical loop from the Santa Clara Great America Tidal Wave and put that on, welded that on. I can remember when Grease Lightning got its little rename in Santa Clara.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it was really because when Stealth opened at Great America, that was the official death of Yankee Harbor. And so there was no reason for any of the rides there to have like a nautical theme. So for whatever reason, they were just like, okay, Grease Lightning. Like they probably were very familiar with AstroWorld and was like, this is a good name for this ride. Like, we'll do that too. And then when it was sold to Six Flags, it was taken apart and it was chilling in pieces in the parking lot at Marine World for a while before it was sent to Kentucky Kingdom, where it lived on again as Grease Lightning, but with a Z this time. And the same logo and motif as the AstroWorld one.
You have to give Paramount some credit. Grease is a Paramount property, so I think they were like, we can just use the movie song from the Grease musical for it. So I think that was part of it. Anyways, I do think that the shuttle loops are interesting, and I will say the weight drop one's especially interesting because the two Great America ones are the only weight drops that also don't have the lattice loop superstructure. So they have like the looping, like the standard Schwarzkopf loop structure instead of the like lattice one that like the King Cobra at King's Dominion had and White Lightning did.
Models? I thought
they were both weight drop models because even though the Chicago one opened later. I double checked. I think they were both weight drops. And if you look at like its installation at Georgia, if the pictures of it, you'll see it has the tower for the weight drop under the spike.
Yeah. Okay.
I think. But kind of in this theme of Six Flags, we're really expanding into the park. In 1980, they unveil what is arguably one of the biggest contributions AstroWorld had to the theme park industry, which was Intamin's first Rapids ride. This was developed at the request of the Six Flags company, and they came to Intamin and they're like, this is an idea we have. Like, what about whitewater rafting? And that ride type is still built brand new to this day. Arguably was like, it is one of the most efficient ways to get your guests wet. And if there's any place to do that, it's Houston, Texas, you know?
Yes. This ride was so iconic.
Super iconic.
Started
and
a
the
revolution.
ginormous boats.
I think this
the
kind
original
of shows
boats were
how
hilarious.
I think this kind of shows how important, I mean, you just mentioned it, but how important AstroWorld really was back then. And to Six Flags, but also just in the theme park scape period.
Those boats that they built were like these big padded boats. They almost looked like saw blades. Like they had a weird little shape to them. The now ubiquitous inflatable ring raft, air-filled raft system came later after some trial and error. They had a lot of fun building this, but I think it was also a lot of headaches, and it was very expensive. At the time, this was a substantially more expensive investment for a regional park water ride than a log flume. And there was issues with boats getting stuck and boats flipping over. And it was like, there was a lot that went into like making this ride functional, but it was so worth it because it was a huge hit. It was such a huge runaway success that it was just too good to be brought down by any of the developmental hiccups that came along with it.
Well, and if you have the chance to ride the one at Magic Mountain or the one at any of the legacy Six Flags parks, really,
Six Flags St. Louis, I think, is pretty close to identical to the one that AstroWorld had.
And I think the one at Six Flags over Texas is also somewhat similar in design. Regardless,
I think it was repurposed from their Jungle Cruise style ride.
The one in St. Louis, I think, was.
No, St. Louis was just it's like a big box. It was like a perfect replica of the one at AstroWorld. And then
I don't know why
Six Flags over Georgia and Six Flags over Texas took their little French Jungle Cruise type rides and turned them into Rapids rides.
That makes more sense. Regardless, they riding those, you can kind of feel the prototypiness, especially the one at Magic Mountain is the one I've ridden the most. And it's like, it's like it literally is like throw a boat with passengers into rapids. You know what I mean? It's not like the narrower lit ones that were later. Like the amount of breadth of movement for your little boat is a little terrifying every time.
Oh, Great Adventure. Theirs is very similar to the AstroWorld one too.
That's probably the right one. In 1982, the park would open the Great Texas Longhorn Revue, which was developed at the same time and by the same team as Six Flags Over Georgia's Monster Mansion. And this was very much inspired by Country Bear Jamboree, but it took over the existing Crystal Palace Theater in Western Junction and remained open until 1999. The reason I mention it is that this and then Monster Mansion, which I think opened the year after in 83 or the year before in 81, I forget which one, but these were really ambitious for a regional park. Like this was Six Flags being very ambitious with what they were doing with their theme parks, because audio animatronics, even like the simple ones, are not inexpensive and they do take a lot of money to maintain. You know what I mean? So they were really trying to do something totally different, but also in line with like what Disney was doing as well. And that same year of 1982, Bally Manufacturing acquires Six Flags. They are a Chicago-based company. They're famous for making pinball machines, but by this point in the 80s, they were diversifying to, casinos, other hospitality areas, and they acquired Six Flags in 1982. It's worth noting that AstroWorld never received one of the Pac-Man lands, but they did have them at Six Flags Over Texas in Georgia. And so Bally Manufacturing, which manufactured pinballs, actually had the initial license by Namco to produce the Pac-Man machines and their arcade machines. Bally would actually sell the chain in 1987, choosing to focus on their hotel and casino acquisitions. Notably, they own the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. But their 5-year ownership of the Six Flags brand had some really strange and significant projects, including the ill-fated AutoWorld in Flint, Michigan. This is just one of those weird... It was bad. And also the other one is the power plant in, I think that was in Baltimore, which was Baltimore. Like survived 1 year. So
was that anyways,
the Bally it was an indoor theme park that was like all animatronics.
What in the roller coaster tycoon is that? Okay, cool. Anyway.
So you can learn more about that, but I also want to say that the timing of this really lines up with the acquisition of the Marriott parks. So Six Flags was bought by Bally, which is a Chicago-based company, and then the Marriott Corporation, Marriott was looking to sell their 2 parks, and you can see why Bally would have been like, absolutely, as soon as the Chicago one got for sale. They were like,
thought of that, Ian.
Take it. Yeah. And so that kind of shows like, I think that at least is part of the contribution to why they weren't sold as a group, is that they were like looking in their backyard and they could see that this is a successful theme park. But it was 5 years. It's, I think, one of the shortest periods of ownership, tied with the proper Time Warner period for Six Flags.
It's a fascinating era, that like the mid 80s, because there wasn't a whole lot happening by way of like coasters. It wasn't, but that was true of the 80s in general. You got a lot of oddball stuff like Sarajevo bobsleds and Accelerate, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I was wondering, I can't remember if I'd looked this up before, but I love that it is like the Bally's. Like it's the pinball machine company and the people that bought the MGM, the original MGM Grand in Vegas that famously had a fire that killed like 40 people.
Yes.
And it just only... And that Bally's was intact until last year. And it was rebranded as the Horseshoe. They took half of Bally's, the nice new tower in the foreground, they made part of Paris, and it is now the Versailles Tower at Paris. And the rear, the old MGM era Bally's became the Horseshoe. So it's actually kind of sad that Bally's as a brand is no longer, like, that name is not really intact in Vegas anymore, because it lasted until last year.
That's crazy.
All right.
And
what's next here? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, babe.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Oh, yeah, it's my turn. Oh, yeah, Waterworld. Okay. This is actually, I didn't know. This is good information. This is yet another trend that AstroWorld can be credited with. Waterworld, the attached water park at AstroWorld, opened in June. It was Houston's first major water park and the first water park in the Six Flags chain. The concept of included water parks and on-site full water parks for regional parks was definitely still in its infancy, because this predated even like the enormous fascination with regional parks and wet dry slides, raft slides, inside of parks as park attractions, which were then later kind of cannibalized by in-park or in-property water parks. We'll talk about that more, because AstroWorld was no exception. They still got a nice big tower of wet dry slides, despite having an on-ticket, on-site water park next door. It opened the same year as Six Flags Atlantis in Hollywood, Florida, which was then sold by the chain in 1989. Six Flags Atlantis is like, of all of those like oddball valleys, regional entertainment things, that was, I think, the one that was closest to a success, because it didn't close after like 1 year. But yeah, so it was acquired by Six Flags mid-development, which as the developers ran out of money. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that tracks. But yeah, Waterworld was a Houston institution, and it was, you could definitely, it may not have been the first time that a water park was attached to an amusement park as part of a resort. I mean, if you trace the history of the water park back, it really doesn't even go that far. I mean, Wet and Wild opened in 75 in Orlando, and that is kind of credited as the modern water park. River Country opened at Walt Disney World in 76, and that would be the first example of a resort, of a park having a water park and also a dry park next to it. So as a concept, it's considered something very normal for a water park to be part of the amusement park equation, whether it's a ticketed attraction separate from your amusement park, like Cedar Point, or if it's included, it's part of the roster, like many of the Six Flags water parks, or it's like it's like right in the middle, like Hershey Park, where like the water park and the dry park are like, you don't even know where one begins and one ends. It's like so interwoven in the DNA of the park. But you can really, as far as this being a trend, yet again, you can trace it back to AstroWorld, because doing this in 1983 was unheard of, and it was so cool. Absolutely. It made such a cost-efficient ticket. You had such a great value by having basically two parks in one. And that exact phrase, two parks in one, was marketing candy, and it would be slapped onto every water park addition to an amusement park ever.
And a lot of what the 80s did is, of course, pioneered by AstroWorld. And it's not just North America. Like, if you look at Japan, if you look at a timeline of Japanese coasters, their interest in Schwarzkopf, their interest in arrows, and their interest in putting water parks inside their existing regional parks, I feel like a lot of this that we're seeing pretty much market-wide, and I think at this point, North America and Japan were a very similar market. Much of that, again, is AstroWorld. Anyway, Alexander.
Also in 1983 was a great year for AstroWorld, because they also got the Skyscreamer, an Intamin first generation freefall, the Intamin Gia Vanilla freefalls. Every Six Flags park was contracted for one of these, as well as Cedar Point and both of the Marriott parks. However, for whatever reason, Six Flags St. Louis never got theirs. That will be a mystery that will haunt me for the rest of my life, is what happened to Six Flags St. Louis's freefall. And this was another like.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, babe.
No, you can go ahead.
This was another classic, like Arrow and Bally's, or not Arrow, Six Flags and Bally's era, and Intamin Gia Vanilla, because they'd already worked with Intamin to do the Rapids ride. They had already worked with Intamin to do parachute towers, which were found. You could find the Intamin Sky Shooter parachute drop rides at all three of the Cardinal Six Flags ground up built parks. Six Flags St. Louis would end up sending their parachute tower to Great Adventure in 1982, where it operated until 2019, and actually stood there up until like this year or last year. I already can't remember. But so there was a great relationship there with Intamin doing all sorts of oddball stuff, and the freefall the Intamin Giovanola Freefall was something that Six Flags was eager to capitalize on. It was just another thing that Six Flags was like, yeah, absolutely, like do this. We'll take one for every park. AstroWorld was no exception. The first two opened at Magic Mountain and Six Flags Over Texas in 1982.
Yes,
and
that sounds
then
right.
in 1983, the rest of the parks got theirs. Great Adventure got a free fall and St. Louis's parachute tower at the same time. And it was marketed as like, you have two drop rides, two different ways to experience free fall. And like Intamin was probably having a field day with that because it was just like a catalog of their great attractions. The skyscraper was built on the site of the Fun Island area, pretty much right where the Swamp Buggy toboggan ride was. It was a very cool looking Intamin second gen free fall. It was solid black. It was the only one that had that color scheme, and it was so cool and so scary. Most of them were silver, or teal was the one for Demon Drop, or like some sort of brown or sepia color, or like tan. But this one was black. It was the coolest looking one. It was retired in 1997 for two reasons. One, because the Intamin second generation freefall Dungeon Drop opened in 1998 in the Nottingham area of the park, and because the plot was going to be repurposed for the Taz's Texas Tornado Schwarzkopf Looper in 1998 as well. Skyscreamer was sent to Six Flags St. Louis. Poor St. Louis did eventually get their Intamin Giovanola Freefall, just 15 years late. The ride was never built, as you might imagine. It was never reinstalled. However, another Intamin first gen freefall, the Edge at Six Flags Great America in Chicago, which closed just a couple years after opening because of poor guests' opinion related to an accident where the ride vehicle went up the shaft and then fell down and landed on top of the car below it. Nobody was severely injured, but people felt like the ride was bad vibes. Six Flags sold it to Rocky Point Park in Rhode Island. And then when Rocky Point Park closed, it was acquired by Premier Parks, who had not yet acquired Six Flags, but they were in the business of acquiring rides and putting them into their various parks. And it reopened as Mr. Hyde's Nasty Fall at Jogga Lake. So an Intamin first gen freefall had been rebuilt at around the same time that Six Flags St. Louis would have been expected to rebuild this one, but for whatever reason they did not. And then it became a parts donor for Mr. Hyde's Nasty Fall once Premier Parks acquired Six Flags. So they acquired Six Flags. They had an intact first gen freefall in pieces at Six Flags St. Louis, and they used it to supplement their relatively new first gen freefall reconstruction at Jogga Lake. Ironically, when Dungeon Drop and the rest of AstroWorld closed in 2005, Six Flags St. Louis would once again be the receiving party for AstroWorld's Drop Tower. Only this time they actually rebuilt it, and they put it up in the back of the park next to Screaming Eagle.
And it was actually pretty good. It was a good ride.
It was good, great.
Yeah.
It had a great location. It was so perfect up there.
They got rid of it. I don't know why, actually, but
yeah. I think just the Intamin second gens are reaching the end of their service lives. There's the ones that are still open. Every time we ride one, there's like a gondola or two or three that are not intact. They're either being
Isn't
worked on or
Carowinds closing too? Isn't Carowinds
closing?
Yeah, that one's done.
Yeah,
theirs is gone.
Sadness.
And a fun fact about St. Louis getting Dungeon Drop. When they built it, it was going to be named Acrophobia, which is a name that Six Flags had picked out for the Intamin standing gyro drop at Six Flags Over Georgia. And to this day, it is the only ride to bear that moniker, because even though Six Flags St. Louis had painted the ride and gave it like an orange, green, and blue color scheme.
It was a good look.
They had already assembled it, and it had the Acrophobia colors and the name, and then they decided to rename it after Superman. So it became the Superman Tower of Power.
I have a theory that to pay homage to that color scheme, when they got Boomerang in 2012, I believe it was, the Boomerang relocation, they gave it that color scheme. Anyway.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
And then Superman Tower Power was retired a couple years ago, sadly. So another AstroWorld ride bites the dust. One that actually successfully reopened after being shipped to another park. A rare occurrence.
So moving on to the 84 here, this is, I think, a pretty significant moment too. Mostly because, first of all, they moved the Looney Tune characters to this park, which I think is like a Six Flags staple. Of course, it still is a Six Flags staple. And that's because this followed the acquisition of Mary's Great America in Chicago. And so Six Flags opted to retire Marvel McFay because now they had Looney Tunes. And Looney Tunes, of course, was also a much stronger IP. This was, I think, an introduction really of using IPs at AstroWorld. And also, another trend-setting moment for this park was that the first Aero suspended coaster, successful Aero suspended coaster, the new generation, I call it 2.0, was installed, and this was Accelerate, which is 1984, early still in this whole game, but that's also why the layout is super safe. I always say, like, oh my god, look at that layout of Accelerate. It's a lame layout, no offense. The layout really didn't do anything, but at least it wasn't like as the Bat, because the Bat, the original, tore itself apart within the 2 seasons, and it was very obvious that that was not the way to build these things. So the middle ground was to build Accelerate, which was so tame that at one point they in fact turned the trains backwards, half of the train, in 2002 for Fright Fest, and that actually remained the same until the ride's closure. And the trains were then all shipped over to Six Flags Magic Mountain to be used on Ninja, which came in really handy because after the Ninja accident in
2014, the George of the Jungle incident.
2014, back when it was a forested in the Lush ride, in the Lush attraction, and then one of the trees, because of all the leaking water from Jetstream, one of the trees, the roots became kind of undone, and it then fell over onto the track. A train dispatched, hit the train, hit the tree, and dangled off of the track mid-forest,
just right in the middle
mid-ride.
of the operating day. I bet they were dumbfounded.
Oh my god! I remember it was like the one Saturday I wasn't at Magic Mountain, and I get a text from my friend Ryan. I know, I was so excited. I get a text from Ryan. Yeah, I'm in the car somewhere like Central Valley, California, whatever. Like, I don't know what we're doing, but I get a text from Ryan. He's like, "Oh my god!" So I look, and of course, this was like when California Coast Kings was kind of like in its infancy. But this kind of shit was like just a one weekend I wasn't at Magic Mountain, and of course,
right,
it would have been awesome to see Ninja derail or be on the train. But anyway.
Right.
But now it came in really handy to have the Accelerate trains laying in the backyard, literally, in the backside of Magic, and eventually we're able to get back to having 3 operating trains by using the parts of Accelerate. So that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, you can tell Aero was like freaked out from Bat by when you look at Accelerate's like layout. It's very similar in ways, but I do think that it's worth noting the Bat's original layout was supposed to have a corkscrew after each lift hill, and it's very obvious where the corkscrews were supposed to be. And in this case, they were like just turns. We're not doing anything snappy. Turns straightaways,
and before the next turn. Yeah,
before the next turn. It's like. It is crazy. But I mean, it was successful. And honestly, the original aesthetic of it is actually kind of one of my favorite things. Like it had a mirrored Accelerate logo, was like a mirrored, very 80s like signage. And
it had this,
like you said, it was part. Yeah, the chrome.
Aesthetic.
It was like polished chrome with like black with polished chrome. It eventually got repainted a few times, but the original aesthetic was like black with polished chrome, and it was nearby. What's it called? The Sky Screamer, but I bet that was a really sexy look, like these black.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm like they were. I don't know what they were thinking with like their black drop tower and their chrome sepia Aero suspended coaster, but they were probably like, this fucks. This is great.
Yeah, like, of course. It's cool.
Everyone's going to love this.
I want to mention that Accelerate, I think, was early and maybe even like the start kind of Six Flags' obsession with the ride rotation program, which is like an 80s situation. So when they built Accelerate, I think they also got this layout because it was easy to relocate, flat land. All you needed was a square box of space. And then even the station was kind of temporary. It ended up, of course, never moving. But we're going to talk about this a little bit later. There's a lot of rides that were in that program. And I think Accelerate, Alex and I had a discussion about this a couple of days ago, really was meant to be in that program because of all the Aero suspended coasters ever built, this was by far the one that was going to be moved the easiest. And all they built for this station was just like a canvas, like station roofing. It was like a tent. It was like practically It was practically a shade structure for a queue that they built for this ride, which is fascinating for that time period. Anyway,
I feel like the ride rotation program is like the ultimate Bally's era legacy.
Yes,
because other
100%.
rides from 1984, like the bobsleds, were both like poster children of the ride rotation program. Everything from roller coasters to Intamin looping starship rides to, I mean, they were shuffling these rides around because they could, because they felt like it. They really thought they had something. And in some cases it worked. There were times that I think it worked, especially if you had a finicky ride that needed some retooling. And if you were going to take it offline for a year and like gut it and maybe even take it down, you might as well send it somewhere else and market it as a new ride, like a la Stealth and like Deja Vu and some of the other examples of this happening. But they were building perfectly good rides, and then they were perfectly functional, and then taking them down and putting them at other parks just because they could.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to have to take a break. I hope you guys have been enjoying this history, but as much as we can talk about this, I think we're going to have to make this a 2-part episode. So join us next week for part 2 on the continued history of AstroWorld, and probably a lot about why this park struggled towards its last few years.
Yeah, so part 2 is going to be fascinating because I think that's where we're really going to get to the beat of it all and
sad.
really why. So where it's going to get sad and fascinating and why, right? And where we beg Beyonce for some love. God. So everyone listening so far, thank you so much for sticking through it through the history part. Next week, promise you, is going to be very interesting when it comes to all of the other reasons AstroWorld didn't make it to the end. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you're listening. We really would appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys next week for part 2 of the AstroWorld's 20 years after.
Bye.